Hey, hello, leavers and believers. Welcome to Leaving Hillsong. My name's Tanya and I'm super excited to welcome you to part 3 of By the Door of the Ear, which has been our deep dive into the construction and deconstruction, as it were, of Hillsong music, its framework, its course, its tracks. And Scott and Kat have both contributed hugely to explaining how this machine works, because it is oh so successful and permeates such a range of environments in the world. Now, these guys are a young working couple and they have a small child. So their time has been limited, and we sat down on a few occasions, and this was the third. And we'd already discussed, if you haven't heard already, parts 1 and 2. We really looked at the music and how it is set up in order to affect an outcome, in order to, create a mood, create an atmosphere, and get people's hands in their wallets. And I started asking them, as you'll hear, about what it's like to be on stage, what it's like to be the person dispensing that kind of emotion. And we had a chat about that for a while, and we moved on to, various states of fear and stress that the musicians are under, and what it's like for them. And we got chatting some more, and Scott started talking about events at youth group, and it's here that I'm going to give you a bit of a trigger warning. I mean, we've talked before, say, on the episode called The Economy of Souls. Sean Namorin spoke about his experiences of hazing at Hillsong Youth, the group sexual abuse that takes place as the leaders bust down boundaries and get kids to do things that are completely inappropriate. So some of that's going to come up at the end of this episode. I even thought about splitting it in 2, but it flows so well that, I guess we also have to look at the reality of this, because the events that Scott describes, and heads up, there's inappropriate sexual behaviour, physical abuse, lack of duty of care. There must be thousands, tens of thousands of young people that have been in and out of these services and have been affected by this culture and dynamic. So, big old warning, heads up. We have quite an elegant conversation. It's lovely. It's passionate. I love the honesty, vulnerability and passion of these two. And Scott has gone out on a limb and described abuses that took place. So, after about 30 minutes in here, if that's not your cup of tea today, press pause and come back if you want later on. Something else I wanted to mention is I've become quite aware that some people feel quite compelled to tell their story as if speaking out is kind of the next kind of evangelism, and they feel really bad if they're not speaking out due to whatever reasons, fear or relationships, or they're just not ready, but they feel guilty about that. And I'm just here to say, don't feel guilty about that. There's a difference between not reporting, crimes, abuses to authorities, and not giving your testimony. You don't have to preach it if you're not ready. In fact, it could be incredibly counterproductive. So if you are ready to share, by all means get in touch. Love it. We love the personal accounts, but yeah, there's no feeling bad for not doing enough around here. So you know what to do. Get your snacks, your coloured popcorns and cornettos and, you know, your golden daytimes, and settle in for a really incredible conversation. There's so much here. I wouldn't even know where to begin, but take care while you're listening. Scott really opens his heart, and yeah, there's lots. Enjoy. By the Door of the Ear, Part 3, with Scott and Kat. So, we left off last time talking about how a service is staged and presented to people in light of the fact that, you know, a lot of people go to a church like Hillsong or to Hillsong because of the fantastic music, and they're really drawn to that, and it is high quality, you know, it's internationally famous, but it's also, you know, I was talking to you, Scott, like during the week about the way they can use music to infiltrate anywhere, because it's just music, and it's just, you know, gospel music. What could be wrong with that? And yet, from your experiences, it's not as kind of simple and pure as all that you were saying. So, I mean, tell me what you can about how this thing is designed and how, you know, everybody knows music causes emotions. That's fair enough. But, you know, to what extent do they manipulate what they say, you know, with the music? Tell me how it starts, where it goes.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it's not to say that the people who are producing the music aren't lovers of music themselves. I think a lot of them really love music. And in fact, I think that's part of the appeal of being at Hillsong as a music lover, which we both are, is that it really does appeal to that sensibility. And a lot of people struggle to leave the church because they're like, well, how am I going to find somewhere with as good a music? And the truth is you won't. Like there really isn't another church that can compare. Like I remember going to C3 in the Northern Beaches, and like, you know, by most, you know, everyday church standard, the quality of the music that they have there is exceptional as well, but it's nowhere near as good as what Hillsong was. And I just remember going there as a teenager being like, what is this? You know, who do these people think they are? Like being quite, and we definitely saw ourselves as superior, I would say.
Even Planet Shakers and things like that.
Yeah, totally. So
well, the proof is in the pudding, isn't it? I mean, it's they've got the millions of sales and the
internet. All you have to do is see that royalty statement that's in the leaked document.
Yeah,
just to see how widespread it is, like how much their music's getting played by churches everywhere. You know?
Yeah, you just don't see, you know, Planet Shakers at the Grammys and stuff. Like it's full on. Yeah.
But I think, you know, like we were talking about how the music is amazing and uplifting, and, you know, it really does elevate your emotions as you sing it. A lot of the songs are pitched in keys that mean that you do have to sing very loudly in order to hit the notes, especially a lot of the male keys are like that. And that means like when you sing like that, you do trigger a release of I don't know. I mean, I'm not a psychologist or anything, but I know that it definitely releases like pleasure, you know, chemicals into your body. Like you feel amazing when you sing like that. That's why everybody loves going to big concerts and stuff, or most people do, you know. So the thing about that music is that it is giving you this incredibly heightened emotional state. And in that state, you are more open to suggestion. You are more open and receptive to the messages. They're absolutely right about that. That's what we would, you know, that's the whole purpose of putting it right at the top of the service, is starting lifting people's emotions so that they can be receptive to the word of God, in inverted commas, but it also makes them receptive to other things as well. And especially in youth, where music plays a huge part in the youth ministry, that can be used in very manipulative ways by people. I don't think they're thinking of themselves as being manipulative as per usual. Like, I mean, that's the caveat. I don't think a lot of them think that way. I think there's definitely some pastors that think that way, but I think that they genuinely see themselves as like opening up or like preparing. We used to talk about preparing the preparing hearts, but like the image that I think that was once sold to us by Julia was like preparing for the king's arrival, or like, you know, like it was a Julia Bell thing clearly, but like, you know, preparing the way for God to come, announcing his arrival in a way. But, you know, I think that what that means is that when they then say things that are damaging, that are problematic, that, you know, there are a lot of people who are emotionally primed to be sucked into that. You know, you're emotionally primed and vulnerable, and then they go and ask you for money straight away, you know. Whatever they feel about it, it is manipulative. You know, you are manipulating people's emotions and putting them in a vulnerable position and then asking them for cash. I don't know. Do you have anything else to add to that?
I mean, Kat, you've seen this take place, watched it over time, or is there like a...
I've definitely had like mystical experiences in like heightened moments of worship, you know, and I would say that's quite common probably amongst people that went there for a long time. You know, I would have considered those like quite life-changing experiences at the time.
Okay, because that's interesting. People do talk about these things having happened in or close to the event. Did you see that from stage? Did you sort of see, like, you know, how many times you were singing 15 times a week or something? Like, do you see it go up and go down and the people start to cry, or like, how does that... Sorry.
Yeah, that's
I wonder more. I'm more cynical from these pastors' perspective, because surely they watch the same thing everywhere they go. They laugh at the joke. They cry at the sad childhood story.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually, because if I think of, did I ever feel the same way on the actual stage as I did at sometimes in the congregation? And I would say the answer is largely no. That's partly because if I'm playing, I'm thinking more just sort of as a practitioner in a way. But then also there are certain things about the Hillsong band that do kind of dry it out for the people that are playing. So, for example, you've got a music director, they would call it, who is literally speaking to you instructions in your ears, like during the 20-minute worship set. So that's enough to sort of snap you out of anything you may
What's he saying?
think.
Or what are they saying?
Oh, you know, they'll be saying like, and next we're going to go to the chorus, and we may repeat the bridge here. I'm assuming it's an American talking to me in the headphones, but it's not really, well, I don't know. Like, to have someone talking to you like that just makes you feel like you're a lemming in a way. You know, you're just following instructions. That's what I was saying last time about how the way the band is set up, it's not set up for sort of, you know, like how a professional ensemble would play. It's set up to enable like people with a very diverse range of skills to be able to play together. Yeah, that's one aspect of it, is the fact that someone's talking in your ears the whole time.
I will say from a vocalist perspective, 100% was immersed in the singing and the leading. But I think that's because I always saw myself as a conduit or a vessel for the emotions of the congregation.
Okay.
And for me, when I was leading them, I wasn't just leading them in a song, I was leading their emotional response to the song. And so that meant that when I sung, I would sing with varying degrees of passion and enthusiasm. I don't know if the other vocalists were like that, but I mean, I certainly resonated with, there was a big, you know, when Bethel Music started doing their thing and they were all about, you know, the Shandalas and the Holy Spirit and stuff. I think that was quite a profound impact for me. Like, I remember, you know, how like He Loves, when the Bethel version of that went out, like that kind of totally transformed the way I did worship, in that I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to let my emotions out. I'm going to sing through everything that I feel on stage. And I don't know how healthy that was. I feel like from that point, I possibly started treating the singing as a bit of therapy, but you know, like when I was doing it on stage, there was a little bit of that, but, you know, you're still kind of applying a craft to it. But, you know, I mean, I feed off the energy of the audience as well, personally. If the audience, this is me talking as a performer, but
Wow.
I feed off, you know, they are an audience. If they're responding, then I'll respond as well. If they're not responding, maybe I'll be a little less sort of emotionally invested in what's happening, but I'll be trying to get them emotionally invested. It's a bit of a dance. We always talked about thermometers versus thermostats. Are you a thermometer or a thermostat? Do you measure the temperature or do you set the temperature?
Really?
So we always wanted to be thermostats. We always wanted to be the ones setting the temperature.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's a hard thing. And like the thing that I've learned through years of actually rigorous performing is that there needs to be a level of disengagement. You can't be emotionally invested every time you do something, every time you do a performance, because it's not healthy. It's not a healthy way to operate. You know, like if I'm doing 6 shows a week and the shows are reasonably intense, I need to be able to perform emotion, but not necessarily feel that and internalize that emotion, if that makes any sense, because otherwise that's just a surefire way to psychologically burn out.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you would never be left. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I definitely was heightened emotions when I was leading from the platform. But then again, I was a vocalist and Kat's a musician. I think there was always a bit of a gulf between the musicians and the vocalists in terms of what we did.
I mean, actually, like I would say I was taken up by like a few moments, like while playing on the stage. But you know, in general, it was more just kind of following instructions a lot of the time. I did kind of feel like the vocalists, from my point of view, seemed to be much more sort of in it, like, you know, and with the congregation in it. Like even, for example, because you're wearing these headphones which cancel out all other sound, you can actually choose how much of the room, because they have microphones in the room picking up the sound of the congregation. You can choose how much of what they would call the ambient sound is going into your headphones. And I would generally choose to have barely any of it, because especially on violin, if I was playing, if I had the ambient sound, I couldn't really hear my instrument. So that meant I didn't really have any idea what the congregation was doing. It may as well have just been us by ourselves on the stage from what I could hear in my headphones, put it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. But there was definitely a big push in some of our later years while we were there to get the band engaging with the congregation and looking up more, because they noticed that you guys weren't
that's true,
really doing any of that engagement that we were, you know, so I think that they wanted more crowd engagement. But I mean, like, we're just, you know, I mean, we're ultimately talking technical. I mean, maybe the point of saying all of this is just to show how technical the whole thing actually is, that there's this weird dance that we're both doing together.
Very technical, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even when we're jumping up and down to the fast songs and like they're dropping beats or whatever they're doing these days with tracks, and you're jumping up and down and going crazy on stage, even then there's a craft to that, you know, there's a balance that you have to keep. You can't just go completely bonkers. Like, you have to stay connected to the crowd and leading the crowd. And then there's levels that you can go really, like, go to town, break a bone or whatever at 7 p.m. service on a Sunday night. But if you did that in the morning at a 10:30 service, that'd be weird. Like, it'd just be super weird. So you have to like temper how you perform, you know. So there are all of these things. It's not just free and easy. Like, there's a skill to it for sure.
But a lot of what people do want to know are the magic tricks. Like what do you do to get people to feel a certain way?
Neither of us were music directors or really prominently worship leaders at any point. But for the most part, the tricks are like, you ensure that there's a good sort of balance of songs, so that there's a journey across all of the songs as well as journeys within the songs themselves. Dynamics are really important for that. You know, the elevated moments, you want the elevated moments to be a payoff. So like, if there's a big bridge, for instance, that opens up, like a bridge in a song, it's a good example of a bridge from like...
Love a bridge.
trying to think of like a recent song so
Yeah,
that I
I'm
don't
thinking of
sound
old.
like
I'm thinking
I'm
old
just
ones
going to
too.
sound like a total like old guy. But
Wow.
like the one that I always thought of was like The
Oh,
Stand.
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, I
too.
know, because it's the classic one, right? Where it opens up into the bridge, which is the "I'll stand with arms high." That one, heart abandoned. That there, you don't want to just crash into that. That's a payoff. You're like,
Okay, I get
you're
it. Yes.
you're building to that
Yes.
moment, and it's in some ways it's like those bridges are to talking. I don't know, is this too crude? But they're kind of like orgasmic. Like that's the point. It's like you're building toward that. So like, I think it's thinking about it like that, because if you just go in with all of those big, high energy, elevated moments the whole way through, there's not enough contrast for the crowd to like feel those emotions, if that makes any sense.
I remember when Lindsay Duncan said on his interview, when he was talking, someone had come to him, he's a psychologist, and said actually that they had responded in an orgasmic way to the music. And I'll never forget, Lindsay said, the body can only respond in a certain number of ways. So, you know, there's only so many strings you can pull.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they're powerful, those musical ones. It's so, yeah.
Yeah.
It totally
You
makes
think
sense.
too, like they're dimming the lights at that point, you know, in the song too, and then they might have just like a spotlight on the person singing at the bridge, and then they'll bring all the lights up too. So you kind of, your body would feel like it needs to respond to the full picture of what's going on, the whole production of it, you know, the music and the lights.
So how is this different though from how's it different from any show? Any kind of well-produced show? What's wrong with this? Why wouldn't they make music like this? This is how
They've studied, that's exactly right. They've studied how the good musicians do things and copied it, essentially.
But it's a very particular, like the thing is that it does work to like elevate those emotions, to bring that from the crowd. But to reduce music, to reduce art and songwriting to that is where I start taking issue, because as soon as an art form or a musical form doesn't follow that structure, we feel estranged from that, I guess. Like it's like we were talking about the idea of classical music as this very, say like rebellious kind of thing to enjoy within the evangelical movement, because it's music that appeals to a different sensibility or a bit different part of you.
Well, you need different tools to engage with it, really.
Yeah. I like ended up in a conversation between like core Hillsong songwriters and a couple of classical musicians, and we're all sitting around at Waterloo McDonald's, and the songwriters are arguing that there is nothing better. It doesn't matter how good the greatest classical composers were, none of the music that they could ever write would compare to a Coldplay anthem done at a concert, like at a big stadium event.
Oh, really?
Because Mozart's music could never elevate the emotions the way that like Fix You is able to do that, right?
Yeah.
And like, obviously, this is showing how long ago this conversation happened, but I do remember that very distinctly, because I was like, oh, it's interesting how they literally see it as a binary. Like the way that these songwriters saw it was like, I know a bunch of Hillsong songwriters. They love things like jazz and classical. It's not like they don't love those things, but within a church context, we don't see room for that, because it doesn't manipulate the emotion. You know, it appeals to something different, and we don't know how to understand that. It's why theater has never really had a place in the church, and when it does, it's it's tacky and awful, right? Because we don't have any way of understanding art outside of propaganda. And I think, I know it's a spicy take, but like, I think
that's an interesting, because I am thinking that classical music obviously revs up emotions in people, but why not in this context kind of thing? Continue.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, of course it does. Like some of the greatest, most emotional pieces ever composed are classical works. But I think the simplicity in terms of like the way that the music of Hillsong appeals to the emotions, but it does so in order to communicate, or to communicate a singular message,
which is
about I guess they would say it's the gospel. I
Mm.
I don't know if I fully agree with that being the gospel anymore. Like, current Scott isn't entirely sure that that's correct, but it's the Bible, at least. Like, they're trying to communicate the messages as they've interpreted the Bible through these songs, and trying to emotionally drive those messages into you.
Yeah. Okay. It's not a place of long attention span either, which you
No.
need some other forms of music. So
Yeah. I mean, it leaves you vibrating after it, like a big conference closing night. You walk out of that space and your body vibrates. It's like the music is in you. But then the next day it doesn't feel like that. And the day after that, it doesn't feel like that. And they know that because they constantly talk about how, like, oh, you can't survive on the hype of the event. But then Hillsong is event world. Like, you go from one event to the next because the
whole calendar is what's the next event.
Totally appears, and if you look on Instagram, like it's just one big marketing campaign with different events. Yeah.
It is. It's event world.
Yeah. Because they're all aware that there's no way that sustains. It's not praxis as a Christian. Like, it's not day-to-day living. It's a big emotional event. It's propaganda, and all it serves to do is to keep you coming back, which is exactly what I like to come back to how we started this conversation. This is the thing a lot of people we know say, like, how would I? And we've said this. How would we ever find a church where the music is as good? So we keep coming back, even though we have so many problems.
Can't they download it and get like a really good stereo at home? Or is it's got to be more than that? It's got to be that group environment as well.
It's the full production. So, and being in the room for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense why they want you to keep buying them music and buying their resources to reinforce the message during the week.
Yeah.
But I mean, what I would also say is that since I have left Hillsong, I've not felt that same emotional high. Like, it's actually left me quite numb.
Yeah, I was wondering how do you go from being on stage and leading people's emotions to nothing?
It's
funny.
It's a big emotional crash, you're surviving, you're emotionally surviving on it, but you're not surviving, because I was very mentally unwell, because my emotions are always oscillating between these extreme events of singing loudly in a crowd 3 times a week, crashing down to earth with my own struggles with mental illness, and oscillating between those two polarities is very hard. And I think it just makes you, what it does is I don't know, it's going to sound weird, but I feel like I was addicted to those moments.
Of course.
And then, yeah.
What would you be?
No, like, it's incredible. And being in front of a crowd is addictive, If it's the sort of thing that you like, which I do, it's addictive. It's the sort of thing you just want to get more, you want to be more and more and more in front of people.
Oh, I was just thinking, for myself personally, since stopping going to Hillsong, I've gotten much more creative with my own musical sort of creative practice. And really the only time I've been comparably as creative as now is before I went to Hillsong, when I was sort of in my late teens as well. So that's just an interesting sort of tidbit. I don't think I can necessarily blame Hillsong for this, but because you get swept up in it, you're not really doing your own work as much, if you are a musician. Like, if you're a practicing musician outside of the church context, chances are, because you're there so much, you're probably not really focusing on your own practice that often.
I mean, that's across the board, with people there.
Yeah, so that's certainly my experience. Like, now I'm kind of rediscovering what kind of musician I am, because I'm not under the influence of Hillsong so much.
Yeah. I think I only ever knew myself as a Hillsong singer. I started singing at Hillsong. It's the only context I ever had for it. And when people ask me, what else do you do with singing outside? A lot of people thought I did musical theatre, and I never did musical theatre. It was never an interest to me. And I used to be very pious about it. And I'd say things like, my voice is for God, which is, mad. But I was like, oh, I only sing at church and I'm very happy doing that. And that wasn't a lie. Like I genuinely was very happy just being a church vocalist. But I think more since I've left, I feel the absence of not singing as much. 20 years of regularly doing it, it feels like it's a part of your identity. So I do kind of feel a little bit like I've severed this very core part of how I understood myself. I've been doing a little bit of music with Kat, and that's been really wonderful because Kat's quite an incredible musician and writer herself. So she's been bringing me into her projects, which is nice. But like when we got in the recording studio the other day for this album that Kat's been recording, I was there in the studio. I was like, I did go into the studio a number of times and do recordings and stuff at church. It was like, like the last time I was doing anything in the studio was a church recording, and so it's interesting recontextualizing all of that with the new me. Yeah, kind of claiming it back in a way.
Wonderful. I like it. I think that grows and grows for people over time. It's been such a short time since you guys left. I mean, you left kind of separate times, so But for you, Scott, what was that? Sorry, what year was it?
2019. Yeah. It is amazing from within the team how much the work that other artists do outside of the church is devalued, like ignored, devalued, sort of not relevant to, like, it's like every other creative endeavor you do outside of the team is non-existent, and I do remember actually Brian having a go at one musician who had left to go to Nashville to pursue her own career. I won't name names, but I remember that she had written a few quite big songs at church, and they were probably still getting the royalties for that. Yeah, and they were great songs too. She's a good songwriter. She was like, oh, you know what? I could have a career being a soloist, doing my own work. And so she went to pursue her own career. And I remember Brian getting up at our team night, like our kind of collective team night across hills and city, and basically saying, you think that this gift is yours, but it's not. It belongs to the church.
Ooh.
And if you think that you can just take the blessing and the favor you've received as a church musician and apply it outside of the church, you're wrong. The reason that you are successful is because of the church. So don't try and go and do anything else.
Nothing to do with God. You've not mentioned God in that statement.
Didn't he say the anointing is on this house?
Yeah, the anointing is on this house, was what he said. And we all knew what he was talking about because he was clearly angry that she had left.
But do you know what I mean? It's not about God. It's not like you've been given this gift of the super, it's the church. We interned you. Do you know what I mean? We paid you. You're not going to take these skills and leave me.
Yeah. Yeah, no. It's very, it's mafioso, like it's the Don kind of being like, you think you can just walk away. Well, I'm taking away the blessing. It's quite psychopathic.
Well, yeah, because then obviously touch not the Lord's anointed means the whole church in his mind as well.
Yeah.
It's an anointed thing.
Definitely. But yeah, like I don't think, as far as my work went outside the church, like I was doing theatre all the time. Not a single person ever turned up to see one of my shows. And when people would ask me how it was going, they'd always say, oh, hey, how's the music theatre going? Even though I'd very clearly told a lot of people I don't do music theatre. I do something completely different. But nobody really cared. It was just about, coming and doing the Sunday service. And I don't think I ever talked about my work outside of church, within church. It felt like something completely separate from what I did in my day-to-day life. And I don't remember anybody sort of taking any interest in your work either while we were there, Kat. I don't know if you had a different experience, but...
Oh, sometimes people would introduce me as like, oh, Kat's this great musician, does all this other stuff, and then she's here too, sort of thing. Like, so people would kind of mention it, but
that's as a kind of a trophy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, more like, look, we've managed to ring in this person.
I mean, that's quite consistent now. That people's study, people's other jobs, really anything that isn't useful is devalued and disregarded and downplayed and discouraged.
Yeah, you're right. It's that trophy. It's almost that trophy thing, because they used to say things like, oh, well, this guy here, he's the CEO of a company, but on the weekends, he comes and serves on the door. Mm-hmm. And it's like almost like this, hey, look at how we are, it very much is like, look how powerful we are in some ways. I don't, I know that that's maybe not how they intend it, but sometimes it reads like that. Like, look at how great we are. Even the CEO of this multi-million-dollar company, comes and does door ministry. Or whatever it was, welcome team. Yeah.
So how do you manage it? Because it's only sort of nearly 4 years. How are you sitting here, both of you chatting away like openly? And you did a TV interview the other day because the issue of the college had come up, and you guys spoke to that on Channel 7. How come, as you know, it can take people. 7 seems to be the magic number that keeps coming up. 7 seems to be a minimum, but often it's 15 or 20 or 30. And what makes you special? How come you're speaking so freely?
I don't know. I don't feel like emotionally invested in anything to do with it anymore, personally. Like, I feel quite neutral now. I feel like I can almost be a neutral commentator. Because I feel like because we left prior to really any of the most outrageous things coming into public knowledge, we were already sort of able to sort of observe that as outsiders. I think it would be different if we had still been there, from the Carl Lentz controversy onwards. That's just my thought. Do you agree, Scott?
Yeah, maybe. I think it's hard. Like, I was talking to a work colleague about this today because she saw the TV interview and kind of asked me about it. And I was like, oh, this is a big box to be opening up. And I think we'll be here all day talking if you really want to know everything that happened. But I think I realized, like, my coming of age was framed by Hillsong. My 20s was framed by Hillsong. And my 30s was almost framed by it. And I just think I need to understand it. And I don't know if, like, maybe I should be doing all of this in therapy or whatever, but with a therapist. But I feel like I could, and I probably should still do it. But I don't know. I want to be a part of this conversation. I own this. It's a part of me, and I refuse to let. I won't be shamed into being quiet about it. I think it's caused me a lot of grief, just the stuff that went on in the background, especially all the stuff regarding my queerness. I feel like there are certain parts of my life that were so absorbed by the Hillsong bubble that I didn't even get to discover parts of myself until I was able to let go of that. And quite honestly, I'm angry, I'm one of those angry, bitter people that leave. But you know what? Like, it's okay to be angry and bitter, and I want to use that because I think, WWJD, right? Go and flip some tables.
I'm just not getting bitter from you, and that's the language of Brian every single time. But it really is, and it's a harsh accusation because it's just thrown around, every time someone disagrees. But angry is an interesting one because some people would discourage it, but it's such a, I don't know, it's such an important place to be, I think. And what they've done, particularly like, on personal levels to people, on a mass level, how could you not be angry?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
They've hurt so many of the people that I care about. And it was all done in the quiet. It was all done in the background. And then people were gaslit into being quiet. And all of these people are liars. These pastors and these leaders, they just get up there and they lie. They bold-faced lie. They look down the barrel of the camera and they just tell the most grandiose, disgusting lies. They belittle people. They talk people down. They make themselves the center of the universe. Like, I'm angry enough that at this point, I think the best thing is for Hillsong Church to die. It needs to end. And I want to be a part of that. I want to, like they're going to get up there on the weekend and say, these people just want to tear the church down. And you know what? I do. But when I say the church, I'm not talking about the congregants. I want the congregants to go and find healthy places to express their spirituality, to express who they are as Christians, whatever they believe. I'm not even critical of that. Like, they can go and explore that for themselves. But I want the leadership. I want the structures of Hillsong to fall. I want the assets to be sold off. I want the money to go someplace where it can actually do some good. And I want people like Phil and Brian and Robert and all the other people who are putting their face on the defense for Hillsong. I want them to disappear, and I want to never see them again. That is my dream. I think people, I don't think I'm the only person. And I think lots of people, especially, we talk about Hillsong college students not wanting to stand up and say anything because they're afraid. And like, you're right. More people need to come out and just be like, yeah, I'm angry and it's okay to be angry, and sure, there are points where I benefited from being a part of Hillsong, especially in like various leadership roles and whatever, obviously voluntary leadership roles. So I didn't have access to the church card, unfortunately. But, like the fact is that like on the whole, I don't think I'm better off for my time there. And I think we've done a great deal of harm to Christendom, to, to society generally. I just don't think we've brought goodness into the world.
Scott, you were 13. And what I was reading about gangs and why particularly young boys join gangs, and it's about, a family, a sense of belonging. There is some kind of status attached, but, it's a family thing. So it's almost like, you were recruited into a gang and here you are. And of course you're angry. You were a child.
Yeah, exactly.
And they took the liberties of, like you say, framing your teens and framing your 20s. And then what? They don't want to take any responsibility for it. It's
and then you're bitter and angry when you start to think about that and you think, actually, that was wrong what they did. I just remember like I've always been a small kid too. Like, I'm not like I was a small kid amongst very, very tall people. But, like I remember having Nick Carroyer and his thugs like just get super angry at me for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. I remember like having the looks from pastors and the feelings of like you're taking up space and like the belittling and the, like I talked to you about, being in a tribal war and having my like all the skin on my left arm torn, like burnt, right? Like I got proper like.
What's a tribal war? Sorry.
Oh, tribal wars were like at youth. They have these big kind of games that they play every week, and the games
for ages. It's like 2 hours before the church service.
Oh no, it's during. The tribal wars are during
the service.
During service, yeah. In the middle of the service, they'll like have, and they've got classic like tribal war games like, Job's Boil, which is like a big pile of like mattresses and chairs and stuff that are piled on top of each other with a balloon hanging from the ceiling, and you have to climb up the top and pop the balloon. And there are 4 teams trying to do it. It's kind of like a capture the flag on a hill. But I do remember getting caught underneath like a pile of bodies and dragged across the room and ending up with like proper burns all up and down my arms from the carpet in the second auditorium. I've still got scars all over my arm from it,
And what duty care did they show you? What kind of response did you get?
Oh, none. No, you don't get a response, right? Or I didn't get it.
Cat's holding up a big old 0 with her hands.
Yeah.
What? Did first aid? Tell me you got some first aid.
No, of course not.
No, there was no first aid for that.
What?
Yeah.
People are sending their children to do these. You could have fallen off the mattresses and broken a bone. The broken bone thing seems like a metaphor, not a joke.
Oh, the ambulance came a number of times while we were doing these things. Like the tribal was really problematic.
What?
We even
didn't they get people to swallow a fish one other time?
Oh yeah, no, there was lots of like animal abuse.
What? Sorry?
we've opened up another.
Oh, this is like, sorry, this is the
can of worms
the
here.
box of craziness that is my time in Hillsong
yeah.
Youth. No,
I'm-
there were things
I'm
like
good with
playing chicken soccer, where a live chicken was brought up, and they set
Oh.
up 2 goalposts, and you had
What?
to chase the
chicken. I thought you were going to kick the chicken. Okay.
Well, I mean, there was an animal, like, because it was animal night at youth for whatever reason. There was this person that was brought in a snake, and she was horrified by the way that we were treating these chickens. I say we, but leaders. Yeah, there was like. I remember when the upper administration said we weren't allowed to do any more drag. They banned drag, which I think is very topical. But like,
It's Trans Day of Visibility today.
yeah, I know.
Point is that yes, like as you said, Scott was a child coming in at 13, and this is what they're doing with the kids. Like, this is how they're getting them in at the start. I don't know.
And parents leave their children there with a complete assumption that they'd be looked after by the church and the leaders. No, and yeah, well,
yeah, I mean, like there was all sorts of stuff happening, like nudie runs involving leaders, like minors and adults.
Did you want to put us in a context there, please? Where was this happening?
Well, this wasn't happening at youth during the service. It was pretty frequent around the services. So whether that was at a connect group or parties or whatever, there was a lot of like nudie runs were really the thing. I don't know if that ever changed, but I thought it was just something that all young people did. Apparently, that's not necessarily a thing.
How does this kick off? So hang on, I'm a connect group. I'm guessing it's not a girl thing. Please tell me it's not.
I didn't go to youth as a young girl, so
it was definitely primarily with the boys. I can't say whether the girls were doing it, but I know that like it used to happen at pretty much every party I went to for a period of about 2 years. And I, being queer, always felt very uncomfortable with it because I was like, as a queer person, you just don't know what's going to happen. So like, I was like, well, I'm just going to stick around with the girls and I'll let the boys go and do their things. But there were a few times where, the like, it's one thing if it's a bunch of, and like, I'm not condoning it, but like, it's one thing if it's a bunch of, 14-year-old boys doing it together. It's another thing when it's a bunch of 14-year-old boys and they're 21 and 22-year-old leaders who are also doing it with them. And that did happen on a number of occasions, although I was not involved in any of that. I do know it happened, and it was a slap on the wrist, and then everybody kept going.
Who instigated?
I'm unsure.
How did this culture start to begin with? Yeah.
Well, I mean, what's happening? So, like, they just were like, let's go. I don't even like the name Nudie Run because it sounds kind of cute. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just good fun.
Yeah. Well, it was like, let's go and do it. Everybody goes down to the park. They take off their clothes and they run across the park. That was what it was.
Okay.
I remember my mum being like, this is how I discovered the word homoerotic. Mum was like, don't you think that's a bit homoerotic? And I was like, what does that mean? I was like, oh yeah, now that you mention it, it probably is.
Hillsong is homoerotic. Like, it's just so massively homoerotic.
It's so camp. Let's be honest. It's so camp. Have you ever been to a Christmas spectacular? It's the campest thing.
Oh. Like some of my learned colleagues, they were saying, "Oh, look at this preacher here," or "Did you know that?" And I'll go, "But he's gay," and I don't care. But the preacher's gay, and then and it happens all the time. I go, "I don't know him, but he's gay." Goodness me, and wow, yes,
yeah. Youth is its own thing. We could talk about for hours, but yeah, all to say, all of this is happening. You just internalize it all. You don't really question it. And now I'm like, actually, you know what? All of this wasn't right. This shouldn't have happened.
I wonder to what extent that's sort of criminal, and particularly the lack of duty of care. And I mean, come on, what, the kid's got burns and you don't give them a bit of antiseptic, better doing something. What?
Nobody's looking after you. Nobody's looking out for you. Like, you're
in a sea of people, a crowd. You may as well be at Big Day Out Festival.
Okay.
Yeah, it is. It's like that. It's like it's like going to a festival. I mean, like, there was no duty of care because there was nobody caring. Like, the pastors are there to
run the event,
and be a spectacle. not to actually look after or get to
Fine.
the kids.
That's just terrifying. It's a church. They get the tax breaks for that, to look after and provide assistance to the community. And if that's the youth outreach, and you're going to set up obstacle courses that are dangerous to make competitive masculinity, what is the...
I mean, yeah, it is. It's very hyper masculine. You know, there's
erotic at the same time. It's fabulous.
Yeah. It's hyper masculine, homoerotic, but then also like aggressively heteronormative. So, you know, like Phil Dooley used to love The Leap. I don't know if you've heard about The Leap.
No.
But The Leap was like they'd partner up girls and boys in the crowd, and then they'd play, what was it? Don't want to close my eyes, don't want to fall asleep. That one. I don't know who wrote it. Aerosmith. Yes.
Don't want to miss the thing.
That's terrible.
Yeah,
That's terrible. How did I know? Oh, that's bad.
Mm.
But yeah, they play Aerosmith. But, you know, once they get to the big expansive moment in the song, the girls then run and jump into the arms of the boys.
Ew.
And everybody cheers. And it was called The Leap.
They were still doing this when I came. Like for the 18 to 25 youth group.
Ew.
You'll find heaps of videos of it online. Like, it's all over YouTube. It was a crowd favorite, and it was a way of, like, people were unwilling. Like, a lot of the people that did it did not want to be doing it.
Really awkward.
It's super awkward and really tacky. But you know,
what's he overseeing? What was he directing that, Phil? I just
yeah, he was the head of the youth ministry.
I mean, we'll cut this, but
I mean, what goes on behind closed doors? You know, like, that was like, I spent a New Year's Eve with the United boys accidentally once. They just so happened to be in the same place I was, and I knew somebody who was hanging with them, so I ended up there. But I remember being totally shocked because they were all absolutely, like, they were drunk off their faces, like, you know, and I was very much like, I thought I had to be really, really good in order to, like.
Yeah, I wonder if that's what I wonder happens. So then you get led into a party like that. They find out how you respond, because some people will be disgusted and I can't go back, and some people will report on them. And do you know what I mean? And then is that how you get led into the?
Well, I mean,
report.
I was having a bad night that night because, like, I'd smashed my glasses and I was blind. So I, like, turned up and they were, like, really drunk and it was hazy and, like, dark. And I hung out with them for a bit, but the whole time I was just like, I can't see anything. This is terrible. But all I remember from that night is not being able to see anything, but knowing I was hanging with the Hillsong boys, and also they were very drunk. And I was, like, feeling quite awkward about it. But, you know, these days I'm like, whatever, like, they can be drunk. Like, I don't care. But it's more the image that's presented.
Because they're lying again. They're lying. Like, it's just a big fat lie.
I mean, I'm more like, if you ever have any, like, you know, group chats about things and you want somebody to join in the chats at any point, I love coming in and having a chat with, you know, other people too. But, you know,
I say on this thing. I thought you meant on, like, WhatsApp or something. I was like, okay.
No, I was thinking more like, you know, if you need people to chat with about other things.
I get you.
Yeah. You know, just trying to think if you want to keep talking about things in a way that doesn't turn this into, like, a, you know, too long of an episode. I guess it's going to have to be a couple episodes, right?
The music's massive, so I think it's not a problem. Like, it's
yeah. I mean, I'm always happy to keep talking about this stuff.
Let's find a way. We'll say, like, goodbye for now or something, and we'll pick it up soon.
Yeah.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you to Kat and Scott for all the time that they've put into this. That interview was recorded one evening after work, and they've just been so kind with their time. I want to get a couple of things clear. I contacted a member of the police force in Australia who has been helping and supporting me with advice and information. And they said to me, nudie runs would be considered grooming by all means. It's also offensive conduct under New South Wales law. In New South Wales, offensive conduct is a criminal offence that involves behaving in a way that is likely to cause a reasonable person to be affronted or insulted. The offence is under Section 4 of the Summary Offences Act 1988. Offensive conduct can be in many forms, such as using abusive language, making obscene gestures, or engaging in behaviour that is overtly sexual or violent in nature. So if there were a complaint, the adult could be charged. The officer then went on to say, in my mind it would constitute grooming. They're only 14, so exposing them to a full-grown male's genitalia would certainly be grooming. What other context would he have to do that? I guess the question you would ask is, why would a fully grown man do it, and what does he have to gain? So certainly in my mind it's grooming behaviour. There'd be all sorts of questions in my mind about all kinds of duty of care and funding requirements that have been breached in this case. And there must be just so many more cases. What an incredible environment. I'm told this week there's only 400 college students left in the world now. No longer are there thousands. So, hopefully there's thousands less abuse cases going on, because that's pretty much all it is. Thank you so much to Scott and Kat for sharing such a range of experiences. I have not wanted to say goodbye to them, so I'm going to hang on to them for music questions. And these experiences of growing up in Hillsong and being involved in so many parts of that machine, it's been really, really illuminating. Thank you so much to all of you for sticking around, for hanging in there, for supporting this mission for so long. We've got some fun stuff coming up with a Vanity Fair docu-series arriving on May 19th. You can quite make the trailer, but apparently there's a bit of me through there, so Team Leaving Hillsong, here we are. Yay. As always, thank you so much for your support, your messages, your insights into this really strange universe we keep poking around in. It's been so good to hear from you, and just to see people's responses to everything that's going on is just so fascinating. Please stay tuned on the social medias. Send through your ideas and suggestions and feedback, and please be my guest if you wish to come share your story. Like I said, there's never any pressure. It's such a weird tightrope to walk, because talk, please, come talk, but please don't talk if you don't want to. But yeah, send those messages. Be kind to yourself. Do what's right for you. Had some beautiful conversations with people still involved right inside the building still, who are looking around outside or are settling in to support. It's so interesting, the range of perspectives. I just think it's funny because, for me, leaving is like you're doing something by not doing something, so you just stay home. It seems quite simple, but there's quite a lot involved in leaving Hillsong, so we're going to be kind to people around us as we learn and keep being kind to ourselves. It's that little bit easier to take the next person's experiences on board. But we're all going to keep leaving Hillsong, and we'll talk soon. Bye.
Yeah. Hi, guys.